The galaxy demanded Earth surrender. No resistance, no battle cries. Humanity simply walked away, and in doing so, planted the one thing no empire could destroy, an idea. They thought we gave up, that we feared them, that we were weak. But what they didn't see, what they never could see, was that we were already inside their minds. And the war they won was the war that changed them forever. When the galaxy united against one species, the silence in the vast assembly hall was deafening. Captain Elena Vasquez stood alone at the center of the chamber, her black diplomatic uniform a stark contrast against the alien architecture that surrounded her. The walls stretched upward for hundreds of meters, carved from a single piece of crystalline material that pulsed with an eerie blue light. Around her, arranged in 7 massive tiers, sat the representatives of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. Elena had been Earth's chief negotiator for 8 years, but she had never faced anything like this. The Alliance of 7 had never agreed on anything before today. These species had been enemies for millennia, fighting wars that spanned entire star systems. But now they sat together, united by a single purpose: the elimination of humanity. High Curator Veltar of the Ethereal Consortium was the first to speak. His species looked like living smoke, constantly shifting between solid and gaseous forms. When he spoke, his voice echoed from speakers built into the chamber walls. Human representative, your species has been judged by this assembly. The verdict is unanimous. Elena kept her face calm, but her heart was racing. She had known this moment was coming for months. Humanity's rapid expansion across the galaxy had made enemies of everyone. In just 50 years, humans had claimed territory in 43 star systems. They had built colonies, established trade routes, and formed alliances with smaller species. To the established powers, humanity looked like a threat that needed to be stopped before it grew too strong. Warlord Thrax of the Krillian Empire rose from his throne. He stood nearly 4 meters tall, his body covered in thick, chitinous armor that had been grown rather than forged. His species had conquered 2/3 of the galaxy through pure military might. When he spoke, his voice was like the rumble of distant thunder. Your kind spreads like a disease across our domain. You claim worlds that belong to others. You corrupt weaker species with your strange ideas about cooperation and equality. Elena finally spoke, her voice carrying clearly across the vast chamber. We have followed all established colonization protocols. We have never attacked anyone who did not attack us first. Our colonies are peaceful settlements focused on research and agriculture. Prime Node, Zeta, 7 of the Synthesis Collective responded next. The Synthesis were a hive mind species that shared a single consciousness across billions of bodies. The representative looked humanoid, but its skin had a metallic sheen, and its eyes glowed with internal light. Your protocols are irrelevant. Your expansion rate exceeds acceptable parameters. Analysis indicates that within 2 centuries, human territory will rival our own. The Architect Prime, leader of the logical and efficiency-obsessed architect species, projected a holographic display above Elena's head. The image showed human colonies spreading across the galaxy like drops of ink in water. Mathematical certainty indicates human dominance probability at 97% within 300 years. This outcome is unacceptable. Elena looked around the chamber at the other species representatives. The Nexus Coalition sent metallic robotic forms that clicked and whirred when they moved. The Harmony Federation appeared as beautiful, luminescent beings that seemed to be made of pure energy. The Shadow Dominion representatives were barely visible, dark shapes that seemed to absorb light itself. Each species was different, but they all shared the same message. Humanity had to be stopped. High Curator Veltar began reading the Alliance's demands. Humanity will immediately withdraw from all territory beyond your origin system. You will dismantle all military vessels and installations. You will submit to permanent monitoring to ensure compliance. Your population will be limited to 10 billion individuals. Your technology development will be supervised by Alliance observers. Elena felt a cold chill run down her spine. These weren't terms for surrender. They were terms for extinction. And if we refuse, Warlord Thrax's mandibles clicked together in what might have been laughter. Then every human world will burn. Your ships will be destroyed. Your colonies will be erased. Your species will become a cautionary tale that others tell their young. The threat was not empty. Elena knew the numbers. The combined fleets of the Alliance of Seven numbered over 2 million ships. Humanity had managed to build 3,000 vessels in their 50 years of space travel. It would not even be a battle. It would be extermination. How long do we have to decide? Elena asked. 72 hours. The High Curator replied. Use them wisely. Elena activated her personal communicator and sent an encrypted message to Earth. 3 simple words that would change the course of human history. Begin Operation Exodus. 12 light-years away, Dr. Marcus Chun sat in his laboratory beneath the Swiss Alps. He was a small man in his 60s with gray hair and thick glasses that made his eyes appear larger than they were. For the past 10 years, he had been working on humanity's greatest secret. Project Resonance. Chen's assistant, Dr. Sarah Park, rushed into the laboratory carrying a data pad. Marcus, we just received the signal from Captain Vasquez. The Alliance has given us the ultimatum. Chen nodded grimly. He had been expecting this day for years. Activate all resonance transmitters. Begin the seeding protocol immediately. Project Resonance was based on Chen's groundbreaking research into neural pattern recognition and cultural adaptation. He had discovered that intelligent species across the galaxy shared similar brain wave patterns when experiencing certain emotions. Love, compassion, curiosity, and hope created nearly identical neural signatures regardless of species. The resonance transmitters were small devices no larger than a human thumbnail. They looked like simple communication relays, but they were much more sophisticated. Each transmitter could analyze the neural patterns of nearby intelligent beings and slowly introduce new patterns that promoted cooperation and empathy. Over the past 8 years, human traders, diplomats, and colonists had secretly installed these transmitters throughout the galaxy. They were hidden in space stations, buried in asteroid mining facilities, and integrated into trade installations. The aliens had never noticed them because they appeared to be standard human technology. How many transmitters are active? Chen asked the doctor. Park checked her readings. 47,862. They're distributed across every major star system in Alliance territory. Chen smiled for the first time in months. Then we're ready. Begin Phase 1 transmission. Throughout the galaxy, the tiny transmitters began broadcasting patterns designed to make alien minds more receptive to human ways of thinking. The signals were too subtle to detect with normal instruments. They worked slowly, patiently, changing neural pathways one firing at a time. Admiral Sarah Blake commanded the UES Horizon, the flagship of Earth's small but capable fleet. She stood on the bridge, watching the massive alien armada that had gathered at the edge of human space. The enemy ships stretched out in all directions, more vessels than she could count. Each one was larger and more powerful than anything humanity had ever built. Admiral, we're receiving withdrawal orders from Earth Command, her communications officer reported. Sarah had been expecting this message, but it still stung to receive it. Signal all ships. We're pulling back to Earth space. No engagement with enemy forces. Her tactical officer, Commander James Rodriguez, looked confused. Ma'am, are we really just going to run? We've trained for years to defend human space. Sarah understood his frustration. Every human in the fleet felt the same way, but they had their orders. We're not running, Commander. We're following a plan that's bigger than any of us understand. As the human fleet began its retreat, the alien commanders celebrated. Warlord Thrax broadcast a message to his forces. See how the humans flee without even attempting to fight. They are cowards who collapse at the first sign of real opposition. What the aliens didn't know was that the human retreat was the most organized and thorough evacuation in galactic history. Professor David Kim, a cultural anthropologist who had spent years studying alien societies, had planned every detail. Nothing was left behind by accident. As human colonists evacuated their settlements, they followed Kim's protocols exactly. Important technology was removed or destroyed. Cultural artifacts were packed and taken, but certain items were deliberately left behind. Books, art, music recordings, and educational materials were hidden throughout the abandoned colonies. These cultural seeds were designed to show aliens what human society was really like. They contained stories about cooperation, sacrifice, and hope. They included scientific research that had been conducted for the betterment of all species. They showed how humans dealt with conflict through negotiation rather than violence. Professor Kim watched the evacuation from Earth's command center. He had spent years developing the psychological profile of each alien species. He knew exactly what cultural elements would appeal to their different mindsets. For the logical architects, he left behind human mathematical proofs that solve problems through cooperation rather than competition. For the warrior Krillians, he left stories of human soldiers who showed mercy to their enemies. For the hive-minded synthesis, he left accounts of human communities working together while maintaining individual identity. Sir, the last transport has left the outer colonies, his assistant reported. All cultural packages have been deployed according to your specifications. Kim nodded with satisfaction. Now we wait. The transmitters will make them receptive to change. The cultural seeds will show them what that change could look like. Elena returned to Earth aboard the diplomatic vessel US Ambassador. She had delivered humanity's official response to the Alliance of Seven. Humanity would comply with the demands and withdraw from all disputed territory. They would limit their population and submit to monitoring. They would accept the role of a minor species in a galaxy dominated by others. The alien leaders were satisfied with this response. They had achieved their goal without firing a single shot. Humanity was no longer a threat to their dominance. The galaxy could return to its traditional power structure, but Elena knew the truth. The real war was just beginning, and it would be fought not with ships and weapons, but with ideas and emotions. Humanity would win by teaching the galaxy to think like humans. Dr. Chun monitored the first transmissions from his hidden laboratory. The resonance patterns were spreading faster than he had anticipated. Alien minds were beginning to show subtle changes in their neural activity. The process was slow and almost invisible, but it was working. Within 6 months, the aliens would begin questioning their fundamental beliefs about power, violence, and cooperation. Within a year, they would start thinking like humans, and once that happened, the galaxy would never be the same. Elena watched Earth grow larger through the viewscreen of her ship. She smiled. The aliens thought they had won a great victory. They had no idea that they had just invited humanity's greatest weapon into their homes. The human capacity for empathy was about to infect the entire galaxy. The war was already over. The aliens just didn't know it yet. The galaxy begins to think like humans. 6 months had passed since humanity's retreat from the outer colonies, and the galaxy seemed to have returned to normal. The Alliance of Seven had divided human territory among themselves, claiming the abandoned settlements as spoils of victory. But deep within those empty buildings, Professor Kim's cultural seeds were beginning to sprout. Warlord Thrax stood in his command chamber aboard the massive battleship Worldbreaker, studying reports from his newly acquired territories. The Krillian Empire had claimed 12 former human worlds, rich in mineral resources and strategic value. His warriors had taken possession of the colonies without resistance, expecting to find valuable technology and weapons. Instead, they found libraries. Commander Vexhal, one of Thrax's most trusted officers, approached with a confused expression on his chitinous face. "My lord, our warriors have discovered something unusual in the human settlements." Thrax turned his massive form toward his subordinate. "Speak." "The humans left behind their stories, my lord. Books, recordings, and art that tell of their history and culture. My warriors have been studying them." The warlord's mandibles clicked in annoyance. "Why waste time with human nonsense? Burn it all and focus on extracting resources. But Commander Vexhal hesitated, something that would have been unthinkable just months before. My lord, perhaps we should examine these materials first. Know your enemy, as our ancestors taught us. Thrax studied his officer carefully. Something was different about Vexhal's tone, but the warlord couldn't identify what. Very well, but make it quick. What Thrax didn't know was that the resonance transmitters hidden throughout his new territories were already working. The neural patterns of every Krillian warrior were being slowly influenced by signals designed to promote empathy and cooperation. The cultural materials left behind by humans were perfectly timed to take advantage of these changing thought patterns. Commander Vexhal returned to his quarters and activated a human recording device he had found in an abandoned school. The holographic image of a human teacher appeared, telling the story of the Battle of Thermopylae. But this wasn't the typical tale of glorious warfare that Krillians usually enjoyed. Instead, the story focused on sacrifice, duty, and the protection of innocents. As Vexhal watched, he found himself thinking about the families that the Spartan warriors had died to protect. For the first time in his life, he wondered about the families of the enemies he had killed in battle. The thought disturbed him, but he couldn't dismiss it. Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. On the hive world of Synthesis Prime, individual units of the collective were experiencing something unprecedented. Private thoughts. Prime node Zeta 7 stood in the central processing chamber, surrounded by thousands of other nodes all connected through the neural network that had bound their species together for millennia. But for the first time in the collective's history, some nodes were thinking thoughts that they didn't share with the whole. Node Beta 451, who had been assigned to inventory a former human research station, approached Prime Node Zeta 7 with obvious distress. Prime Node, I am experiencing irregularities. Elaborate, Zeta 7 responded through the neural link. I have been studying human research data as ordered, but I find myself having thoughts that belong only to me. I think about the research subjects as individuals rather than data points. I feel concern for their well-being. Prime node Zeta 7 felt a flicker of something that might have been worry. This is impossible. Individual thought leads to chaos and inefficiency. But even as Zeta 7 spoke these words, it was experiencing its own private thoughts. The human research data showed how individual creativity had led to breakthrough discoveries. The humans had solved problems by encouraging different perspectives rather than enforcing conformity. Perhaps, Beta 451 said hesitantly, individual thought doesn't have to mean chaos. Perhaps it could mean growth. The words sent ripples of unease through the local nodes, but also something else. Curiosity that in the pristine laboratories of the Architect Collective, similar changes were occurring. The architects prided themselves on perfect logic and efficiency. Every decision was based on mathematical calculations and optimal outcomes. Emotion was considered a flaw that led to poor choices. Architect Prime reviewed efficiency reports from the newly acquired human territories. The numbers should have been satisfying. Resource extraction was proceeding ahead of schedule. The former human installations were being converted to architect specifications with minimal waste, but as Architect Prime studied the human research data found in the abandoned facilities, something unexpected happened. The human scientists had often made decisions that seemed mathematically inefficient but led to better outcomes in the long term. They had spent resources on projects with uncertain benefits. They had helped other species, even when it cost them valuable time and materials. According to pure logic, these decisions should have weakened humanity. But the data showed the opposite. Human colonies had thrived because of these inefficient choices. Their willingness to help others had created networks of allies and trading partners. Their investment in uncertain research had led to breakthrough technologies. For the first time in its existence, Architect Prime made a decision that wasn't based on pure calculation. It decided to preserve some of the human research facilities instead of dismantling them. When asked to justify this choice mathematically, Architect Prime found itself saying something that shocked even itself. Some things cannot be calculated. They must be felt. Dr. Marcus Chun monitored these changes from his hidden laboratory on Earth. The neural scanning arrays showed exactly what he had hoped to see. The resonance transmitters were working perfectly. Alien thought patterns were shifting toward human emotional ranges. "Sarah, look at these readings," Chin called to his assistant. "The Krillian warriors are showing increased activity in brain regions associated with empathy. The Synthesis Collective is developing individual neural patterns. The architects are making decisions based on emotional reasoning." Dr. Park studied the data with amazement. How long until the changes become noticeable to their own leaders? Chin smiled. "Based on these progression rates, I'd estimate another 3 months before they start questioning their fundamental beliefs. 6 months before they begin reaching out to us." Captain Elena Vasquez received the first diplomatic contact 8 months after humanity's withdrawal. The message came through unofficial channels, transmitted by a lone Krillian ship that had entered human space without authorization. Elena met the alien delegation aboard a neutral space station at the edge of the solar system. She had expected to face typical Krillian warriors, brutal and aggressive. Instead, she found herself speaking with Commander Vexhal, who seemed almost gentle. "Captain Vasquez," Vexhal began, his translator struggling with unfamiliar concepts. "I come to speak of things my people have never discussed before. We have been studying your cultural materials, and they have raised questions." Elena maintained her diplomatic composure, but inside she was celebrating. The plan was working exactly as Dr. Chun had predicted. "What kind of questions, Commander?" "We have always believed that strength comes from conquest and dominance. But your stories speak of a different kind of strength. Strength that comes from protecting others, from showing mercy to enemies, from building rather than destroying." Vexhal paused, clearly struggling with concepts that had no equivalent in traditional Krillian culture. "I have been having dreams, Captain. Dreams of the families I have destroyed, of the children who died in battles I thought were glorious. These dreams cause me pain, but they also make me want to be better." Elena felt a surge of hope. This was exactly what Professor Kim's cultural seeds had been designed to achieve. "Commander, what you're experiencing is called conscience. It's the ability to feel empathy for others, even those who are different from you." "Conscience," Vexhal repeated the word slowly. "Yes, that describes it well. But I am not the only one experiencing these changes. Warriors throughout my fleet are questioning our traditional ways. Some refuse to attack civilian targets. Others ask why we fight instead of simply following orders." Elena leaned forward. "What does Warlord Thrax think of these changes?" Vexhal's expression became troubled. "He grows more confused and angry each day. He orders executions to restore discipline, but the warriors hesitate to carry them out. He demands that we burn the human cultural materials, but we find excuses to preserve them." "And what do you want from humanity, Commander?" "Guidance," Vexhal said simply. "We do not understand these new feelings, but we know they are important. We want to learn how to be better than we were." Similar conversations were taking place across the galaxy. Representatives from the Synthesis Collective made contact to discuss the concept of individual identity within a cooperative framework. Architect delegations requested information about human decision-making processes that incorporated both logic and emotion. Even the more mysterious members of the Alliance were changing. The Shadow Dominion, who had always operated through fear and intimidation, began questioning whether their methods actually achieve their goals. The Harmony Federation, who had thought themselves already perfect, discovered that human concepts of growth and change could lead to even greater harmony. Professor Kim worked around the clock to prepare educational materials for the changing alien species. He developed cultural exchange programs that would help aliens understand human values while respecting their own traditions. "The key is not to make them into humans," Kim explained to his team. "The goal is to help them develop their own versions of human values." Empathy, cooperation, and curiosity can express themselves differently in each species while still promoting peace and understanding. Admiral Sarah Blake received authorization to begin limited contact missions with reformed alien groups. Her ships carried teachers, artists, and diplomats instead of weapons. The first joint human-alien crews began working together on exploration and research projects. It's remarkable. Admiral Blake reported to Earth Command. 6 months ago, these species were ready to exterminate us. Now they're asking us to help them become better versions of themselves. But not all aliens were accepting the changes peacefully. Warlord Thrax grew increasingly desperate as his empire began to fracture. Traditional Krillian leaders watched their warriors refuse orders and question authority. Some attempted to purge the infected individuals from their ranks. High Curator Veltar of the Ethereal Consortium called for an emergency session of the Alliance of Seven. The meeting took place in the same chamber where humanity had been given its ultimatum, but the atmosphere was completely different. Something is wrong, Veltar announced to the assembled representatives. Our peoples are changing in ways we don't understand. They question decisions that have guided our civilizations for millennia. Warlord Thrax slammed his massive fist on his throne. It's the humans. Somehow, they have poisoned our minds with their weakness and sentiment. But even as Thrax spoke these words, he felt doubt creeping into his thoughts. Was compassion really weakness? Was cooperation really inferior to domination? The questions tormented him because he couldn't find logical answers that satisfied him anymore. Architect Prime spoke with uncharacteristic uncertainty. Analysis of the changes suggests they are beneficial rather than harmful. Crime rates have decreased across all our territories. Productivity has increased. Interspecies conflicts have virtually ceased. That's not the point. Thrax roared. We are losing our identity, our purpose, our very nature. Prime node Zeta 7 responded quietly. Perhaps our old nature was the problem. The words hung in the air like a challenge. For the first time in their history, the Alliance of Seven was divided not by territorial disputes or resource conflicts, but by fundamental questions about who they wanted to be. Doctor Chin watched the proceedings through hidden surveillance devices and smiled. The transformation was accelerating beyond his most optimistic projections. The aliens were not just adopting human values. They were actively choosing to become better versions of themselves. Phase 2 is complete, he told Dr. Park. They're ready for Phase 3. Which is? Park asked. That Chen's smile widened. They invite us back, not as conquered subjects, but as teachers and partners in building a better galaxy. The invitation would come sooner than anyone expected. But first, the galaxy would have to decide whether it wanted to embrace this new way of thinking or fight to preserve the old ways of violence and domination. The real test was just beginning. How humanity won by teaching the universe to care. 1 year after humanity's withdrawal from the galaxy, the impossible happened. The Alliance of Seven collapsed, not through warfare or political maneuvering, but through a simple lack of interest in maintaining power through fear. Captain Elena Vasquez stood once again in the Great Crystal Chamber, but this time the atmosphere was completely different. Instead of 7 hostile alien delegations threatening humanity's existence, she faced dozens of species representatives who had come to ask for help. Commander Vexhau, now calling himself Protector Vexhau, had led a peaceful revolution within the Krillian Empire. Half of their warrior fleets had transformed into protection forces that defended weaker species from pirates and natural disasters. The other half had become exploration vessels, seeking new worlds to study rather than conquer. Captain Vasquez, Vexhau began, his voice carrying none of the aggression that had once defined a species. We have learned much in the months since you left, but we need guidance to continue growing. Elena looked around the chamber at the assembled aliens. Each species had undergone remarkable transformations. The changes were so complete that she sometimes forgot these were the same beings who had threatened to exterminate humanity just 1 year ago. Prime node Zeta 7 of the former Synthesis Collective had adopted the name Unity and now spoke for a confederation of individuals who chose to work together while maintaining their unique perspectives. We have discovered that individual thought enhances rather than threatens collective action. But we struggle to balance personal desires with group needs. Architect Prime, now simply calling itself Builder, had revolutionized its entire civilization around the concept of creating rather than optimizing. We have learned that efficiency without purpose is meaningless, but we need help understanding what purposes are worth pursuing. Dr. Marcus Chun revealed the full scope of Project Resonance at a gathering of galactic leaders. He stood before the assembled representatives and explained exactly what had happened to them over the past year. The resonance transmitters didn't control your minds, Chin explained to the rapt audience. They simply made you more receptive to ideas that your species had never considered before. The cultural seeds we left behind provided examples of different ways of thinking. But every choice you made was your own. Former warlord Thrax, who now led the Krillian Peace Corps, raised his massive hand. Dr. Chun, many of my people fear that we have lost our identity. How do we remain Krillian while embracing these new values? Chun smiled warmly. You don't have to stop being Krillian. Your strength, your courage, your loyalty to your people are still valuable traits. But now you use those traits to protect rather than conquer, to build rather than destroy. Professor Kim presented his comprehensive study of how human values could be adapted to different alien cultures. His research had become the foundation for the new galactic civilization that was emerging. Each species brings unique strengths to the galaxy, Kim explained. Krillian courage, synthesis cooperation, architect precision, ethereal wisdom. The goal isn't to make everyone the same. It's to help everyone become the best version of themselves. Admiral Sarah Blake commanded the first truly integrated fleet in galactic history. Her ships carried crews of humans and aliens working side by side. The flagship, renamed UES Harmony, had become a symbol of the new era of cooperation. Admiral Blake, to Earth Command, she transmitted from the bridge of her vessel. The joint exploration mission to the Andromeda Approach has discovered 17 new habitable worlds. All species representatives have agreed to establish research colonies rather than territorial claims. The bridge crew around her represented a dozen different species. Her tactical officer was a reformed Krillian warrior who used his strategic skills for exploration planning. Her science officer was a former architect who had learned to value discovery over efficiency. Her communications officer was a synthesis individual who maintained connections with networks across the galaxy while thinking independently. Working together, they had achieved more in 6 months than any single species had accomplished in decades, Dr. Chen's greatest achievement was not the resonance technology itself, but what he called the Compassion Protocol. It was a set of principles that all member species had agreed to follow. The protocol is simple, Chen explained to new species that requested to join the galactic community. Before making any major decision, ask 3 questions. Will this action cause unnecessary harm? Could this goal be achieved through cooperation instead of force? How will this decision affect the weakest members of our community? The protocol wasn't enforced by laws or threats. It was maintained through education and cultural exchange. Species that followed the protocol found themselves welcomed into a network of allies and trading partners. Those that rejected it found themselves increasingly isolated as other civilizations chose cooperation over conflict. Captain Elena Vasquez was appointed as the first director of Galactic Cultural Exchange. Her job was to help newly contacted species integrate into the growing community of peaceful civilizations. Director Vasquez came a transmission from the Outer Rim. We have made contact with the stellar nomads. They're a spacefaring species that has been isolated for centuries. They're requesting information about the Compassion Protocol. Elena smiled as she prepared her response. Each new species that joined the community made the galaxy a little safer and more prosperous for everyone. The transformation wasn't limited to the original alliance of 7. Word of the new galactic community spread through space lanes and trading routes. Species that had been hiding from the violence of the old galaxy emerged to participate in the new era of cooperation. The Shadow Dominion had undergone perhaps the most dramatic change of all. Their mastery of stealth and infiltration had been redirected toward peaceful purposes. They now served as mediators in disputes and protectors of vulnerable species. Former High Curator Veltar, now calling himself Guide Veltar, explained his species transformation. We had become so focused on maintaining mystery and fear that we forgot our original purpose as teachers and guides. The humans reminded us that true power comes from helping others grow, not from keeping them ignorant. Professor Kim established cultural exchange academies throughout the galaxy. These institutions became centers of learning where species could study each other's history, art, and philosophy. Understanding leads to empathy, Kim taught his students. Empathy leads to cooperation. Cooperation leads to progress that benefits everyone. The academies produced a new generation of leaders who thought in terms of galactic benefit rather than species advantage. These leaders gradually replaced the old guard in governments across the galaxy, but perhaps the most significant change was in how conflicts were resolved. Wars had become almost extinct, not because they were forbidden, but because species had learned better ways to solve their problems. When the mineral-rich Kepler system was claimed by 3 different species simultaneously, the old galaxy would have seen a 3-way war that devastated entire worlds. Instead, the species formed a joint partnership that gave each group access to the resources they needed while preserving the system's unique ecosystem. When a plague threatened the agricultural worlds of the Tau Ceti region, dozens of species contributed resources and expertise to develop a cure. The crisis brought the galactic community closer together instead of causing panic and isolation. Dr. Chun monitored these developments with satisfaction, but also with humility. We didn't conquer the galaxy, he explained to a gathering of human leaders. We simply showed them a better way to live. They did the hard work of changing themselves. The resonance transmitters were gradually being deactivated as they were no longer needed. The alien species had internalized human values so completely that external influence was unnecessary. The network served its purpose, Chen reported, but now each species is generating its own compassion and cooperation. The transformation is permanent and self-sustaining. Admiral Blake received a transmission that would have been unthinkable just 2 years earlier. Former warlord Thrax was requesting human assistance in establishing the first Krillian Peace Academy. Admiral, we want to teach our young warriors the same lessons you taught us, that true strength comes from protecting others, that the greatest victories are won without violence, that enemies can become friends through understanding. Elena Vasquez returned to Earth for the first Galactic Unity celebration. Representatives from 200 species gathered in orbit around humanity's homeworld to celebrate the new era of peace and cooperation. Yes, she looked out at the vast fleet of ships representing the diversity of galactic civilization. Elena reflected on how far they had all come. The humans who had been forced to flee their colonies in defeat had returned as teachers and partners in the greatest transformation in galactic history. We won by teaching the universe to care, she said in her address to the assembled representatives. We showed that empathy is not weakness but strength, that cooperation achieves more than conquest, that peace is not the absence of conflict but the presence of understanding. The celebration lasted for 3 days. Species that had been enemies for millennia now worked together to plan joint exploration missions, cultural festivals, and scientific research projects. Dr. Chun received the Galactic Peace Prize, established by the former Alliance of Seven to honor those who advanced the cause of universal cooperation. In his acceptance speech, he revealed the final secret of Project Resonance. The transmitters didn't give the aliens human emotions, he said to the surprised audience. Those emotions were already there, buried under layers of culture and conditioning. We simply created the conditions for them to emerge. The revelation sent ripples of understanding through the crowd. Every species had the capacity for empathy, and cooperation. They had simply needed someone to show them how to access those feelings. Professor Kim established the Institute for Galactic Harmony, dedicated to studying how different forms of consciousness could work together effectively. His research would ensure that future generations maintained the peaceful civilization they had built. The work isn't finished, Kim reminded the gathered scientists and diplomats. Each new generation must choose cooperation over conflict. Each individual must decide to show empathy rather than indifference. Peace isn't a destination, it's a journey we take together. As the celebration concluded, Elena looked forward to the future with hope. The galaxy had become what humanity had always dreamed it could be, a community of diverse beings working together toward common goals. Different species bringing their unique talents and perspectives to shared projects. The humans had walked away from a fight they couldn't win and had won a war that changed everything. They had proven that the greatest victories are achieved not through superior weapons or military strategy, but through the simple act of teaching others to care. The galaxy was human now in every way that mattered, not because aliens had become human, but because they had learned to embrace the best aspects of humanity. Compassion, curiosity, cooperation, and hope had spread from a single species to an entire galaxy. And in the depths of space, new resonance transmitters were being prepared for launch toward distant galaxies. The gift of empathy was too valuable to keep to themselves. Humanity had learned that the greatest way to honor their values was to share them with the universe. The quiet revolution continued, spreading peace and understanding one mind at a time across the endless cosmos.